Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of SacTown Movie Buffs. Once again, I'm Kier, and this is Jason. And today we are back with a new show for you guys. We're actually going to be doing a kind of a pairing of two documentary films that we saw both streaming. The first being Zappa, and the second being Belushi. I know Belushi was on Showtime, is where I got it from. And then Zappa was that Netflix?
No. It's video on demand. So
Okay,
wherever
okay.
you want to rent
Yeah,
it.
so wherever you want
Yeah.
to get that one from,
Yeah.
Amazon or something of that nature.
Fandango, Voodoo, probably all of them. Yeah.
Yeah. So we just thought we'd do a quick little pairing of two documentaries about real life people. So the first we'll be doing will actually be Zappa. And if you don't mind, Jason, I will actually have you start and get that one squared away. So let's get into it. And we'll start with Zappa. So if you want to tell us a little bit about that one, sir.
Sure. So Zappa is a documentary, of course, about Frank Zappa, and it is directed by Alex Winter, also known as Bill S. Preston Esquire, Bill of Bill and Ted, basically, who a lot of people may not realize is a pretty accomplished documentary filmmaker. So I didn't know that until a few months ago, but he's made quite a few acclaimed documentaries, including this one. But Frank Zappa, of course, was one of the most well-known and influential musicians of the last century. He accomplished a hell of a lot, frankly. He was a musician. Obviously, he was also an advocate for free speech. He ended up being a politician. He was a composer. He did a lot of things, and it was kind of it's pretty impressive to know that he passed away at the age of 52 or 53, I think, having accomplished about 20 times more than I've done in my life, and I'm 42, so I've got a lot to catch up on. But he was a brilliant musician, and I'm a fan of his, so I kind of knew that I was probably going to like this movie going in. I'm a big fan of documentaries, and I'm a big fan of his music. Not that I know all of it, because he's put out a whole lot of music. I think he put out something like 50 something albums over the course of his career, and I'm familiar with about 10 of them. I've got more to listen to, a lot more to listen to, but I'm a fan of his. But I thought this was a really fascinating documentary. Even being a fan, I've always said that you can make a really good documentary about just about anything, no matter how little you may think you are interested in it. If you watch a really good documentary, it'll make you interested in it for at least that period of time. But I was already interested in this subject matter, so I knew I was going to like it going in pretty much. But yeah, it did not let me down. I thought it was a really insightful documentary. It covered a whole lot of ground in just a little over 2 hours. And usually I tend to think that when you get over 2 hours, it can be pushing it for a documentary a little bit, but I didn't feel that way this time. I wasn't bored, and I had a lot of respect for this guy going into the movie, but I had so much more going out of the movie. I didn't realize a lot of the stuff that he did with regard to politics. I knew a little bit about his free speech advocacy in the 80s when Tipper Gore and all those ladies were campaigning against popular music like Prince and a lot of heavy metal bands, about the lyrical content and stuff. So I knew a little bit about that, but I definitely didn't know about the half of it. And it was just really, I think he's just a really interesting person, and this movie kind of nails why he's a really interesting person. And I've always had a real big affinity for musicians who can play just about anything. Like Prince is one of those. He can play any instrument. He can hear something and play it like that. And I'm in awe of those people, because I can play guitar a little bit, but I'm not a great guitarist, and he's a truly great guitarist, truly great musician. So if you're a fan of music, fan of documentaries, fan of biographical documentaries, any of those, I think it's definitely well worth the price of the rental for sure. So yeah, I love this movie. Definitely one of the best movies I've seen this year. So how about you, Kier?
I'm not quite in the same camp as one of the best I guess films I've seen of the year, documentaries maybe. I don't know. I haven't seen a whole lot of docs this year. I mean, honestly, I didn't know a lot about Zappa. You know, I've heard the name before, but he's not someone that I would necessarily gravitate toward based on his music. And when I found out, I couldn't think of any songs that he even made. I was like, I don't even know if I know any of the music that he made, but you know, apparently on his own, not when he's played with somebody else. He's only had, I guess, one semi-hit, which is probably why I may have never actually have heard any of his music before. So yeah, I didn't know a whole lot about him or about his life. I mean, I kind of almost feel like with documentaries, and I hear what you're saying. You know, anybody can be interesting, or anything can. You know, it was well done. It's a well done documentary, and I think that it's great. I think if you're a fan of Zappa or you're a fan of the music or that sort of stuff, you're definitely going to get some great nuggets out of that. But I think being somebody that's not necessarily into rock music per se, and somebody that's never heard any of his music, I just wasn't as, you know, I wasn't as engaged, I guess, because it's just not my genre or my type of music. But you know, just hearing about his life, he's definitely lived an interesting life. Like you said, he was a composer. He was into politics. I didn't know much about that. You know, and he obviously had an influence on, you know, a lot of other musicians and a lot of other people. So, I mean, I thought all that was interesting. As documentaries go, I mean, it was a little bit over 2 hours, and it did feel like for me, it did feel a little bit like it did kind of push on maybe just a little bit long, in my opinion. But that's just as somebody that wasn't a fan. So as somebody that's not a fan of his music and didn't know who he was, and just watching it off the cuff, I don't know if we're going to have that same experience that you might have had already coming into it, knowing who he was and being a fan of his. I don't know. You know, it's hard to say. I don't know if everybody's going to have that same impression, but I feel that way about most documentaries that are about a one specific person. If you don't know the music, or you're not as interested in that person particularly going into it, you may not have that same affinity that someone that already was interested and already in the camp is going to have. So that's just my take. As documentaries go, I thought it was well done. I thought it was impressive that he had all these videos. He had like a huge video library of pretty much chronicled his entire career. I mean, you know, he seemed like an interesting person. Definitely somebody that, you know, like you said, lived an interesting life. Seemed like, you know, he was interested in all different types of genres of music, and had some influence over many different artists. You know, there was the videos of all the big name stars visited his home, and Eric Clapton and things of that nature, and then, you know, the different people that he toured or played with. So I thought all that was interesting in itself, and I didn't know much about his political aspirations. You know, it was interesting to see him with like the long shaggy hair, and then he like cleaned up for the politics, and then towards the latter part of his life he went back to like the long shaggy hair again. I thought that was kind of interesting. So yeah, it was like one of those things where it was kind of an interesting documentary. I respected, you know, that, you know, he had an influence over people, but for me, I just was never 100% engaged, I guess. And I, you know, so it's just probably just a personal preference, I guess. So I think it's a documentary that but then again, if you're into him, those are the people that are going to watch the documentary to begin with. I don't know if it's something that, if you've never heard of him or don't know anything about his music, you're immediately going to watch a documentary about him. So kind of leave it at that.
Yeah.
So like I said, I thought it was a fine documentary. It didn't move me. It didn't speak to me. Just as maybe a documentary about Tupac or something like that, for somebody that's not into that kind of music, they're not going to be as engaged, you know, if you aren't into hip hop or you aren't into, you know, his life or his story, because you're not into that music. It's probably going to be hard to be as engaged in it, just because when you're listening to the music and listening to him playing, if you're not into that kind of music, you're probably not going to be as engaged as I guess the best way to put it, without sounding, you know, like you don't care. You do care, but it's you know, it's just, you're not going to have the same feelings as somebody that's already in that camp, I guess. So just my take. So yeah. So
okay.
So but yeah, overall, like I said, it was okay. Yeah, I didn't dislike it or anything like that. I just, like I said, I wasn't a huge fan of the music, and you know, but definitely he was an interesting person.
Yeah. Oh, it's his music's definitely an acquired taste.
Yeah.
So that's for sure.
Yeah. So Yeah, and like I said, it's somebody that I'd heard of, but I never knew anything about him, to be honest with you. I'd heard the name, but but I didn't know anything about him, and and like I said, then when I found out that he never really had a big standalone hit on his own, other than I don't know,
Valley Girl.
Valley Girl was the only one that went
Yeah.
like number 8 on the charts or something like that.
Yeah, but he was never going for that either. He never tried for a hit. So I think it's interesting that someone who can be on purpose that far outside of the system can still have that much of an impact. I respect that. So
yeah, nothing wrong with that. Like I said, I'm not knocking him for not being a hit maker. I'm just saying that's probably why I've never heard of him.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You would have to seek somebody out that's probably never had a major hit, over the span of 50 albums or something like that. You know what I mean? That's somebody you would probably have to seek out and have to already kind of probably be into that type of genre or that type of music. So, which for me, I'm just not. So.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, like I said, nothing, no fault against the documentary or anything like that. It, just wasn't in, the types of docs or the types of people that I would probably gravitate towards naturally. So, hey, what can I say? just being honest. So,
yeah.
But yeah, cool. Well, anything else you wanted to add about Zappa?
No.
All right, cool. All right. All right. Well, moving on to the next one, which is going to be Belushi. Both single named one. So this
that's why I thought it was a good double feature. I thought both single
for sure.
last name documentaries.
Yeah. So this one is chronicles the life of I was getting confused. John Belushi.
John, not Jim.
I know. They're so similar. I know. I get them so mixed up all the time. So I don't want to.
When I was a kid, especially.
Right. Yeah. So John Belushi. So most people have at least probably heard of John Belushi.
Right.
And if you haven't heard him, you know of his brother Jim Belushi, who's been an actor. So John Belushi was. This is basically chronicles his life, and obviously he also had a very untimely death. He died even sooner. He was only 33, I think, when he actually passed away. So he lived a very interesting life as well. So the film basically chronicles his upbringing and his getting into comedy and kind of improv shows and stuff like that. And so it was really interesting. I really enjoyed this one because it showed basically how Saturday Night Live came about, and he was actually a performer in Saturday Night Live. I didn't realize that before Saturday Night Live he was already kind of in a group where they were doing basically the very same skits that they're doing in Saturday Night Live today, and that actually with all your major characters, with the Chevy Chase and Dan Aykroyd and Bill Murray and all those guys, Ratner and all those people. He was already in a comedy troupe with all these people, and they basically formed a show around all these guys. And so it kind of chronicled like his coming up and his getting into the comedy, and then obviously with fame and success and starting to get into movies and becoming a budding movie star, with all the movies he did. And then, obviously his obsession with wanting to get bigger, and then also his obsession with, of course, with drugs, which is kind of the big story, of all the folks that died way too young, is, they kind of get into the drugs and get into that lifestyle. So it was a very interesting documentary. I didn't know a whole lot about his life. Clearly he was kind of more the pinnacle of his fame was, either before we were born or, right after we were born. So, we would have been, we were, practically, kids, young kids, when he passed away in like the early 80s. So, so he was somebody that, pretty much kind of passed away before our time. But I was really interested and engaged in this because, I knew a lot of the characters that he toured with, and I had seen the Blues Brothers, and I had seen, Animal House and some of those other movies, and I've seen some of the old SNL skits that he did and that sort of stuff with like Richard Pryor and that kind of stuff. So, so I kind of was more familiar with him as opposed to say like Zappa, who I didn't know anything about at all. So I was probably more engaged going into it because I already knew who he was and kind of wanted to see kind of what his lifestyle was all about. And again, I thought the documentary was great. It was a a good showing of his life and his ultimately obsession with drugs and that sort of stuff, and his relationship with his wife, and who was kind of his rock for many of those years. And I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good documentary. I thought it was fun. I definitely feel like he's one of those stars that we obviously always say die too young. Kind of lived the same kind of story. I kind of equate, like when I was watching it, I got a lot of like Chris Farley feel about him. You know what I mean? Chris Farley kind of had that same kind of lifestyle where he came up, was a comedian, really funny, was on SNL, started doing movies, got to like the height of success, and just kind of like the drugs kind of overtook him, and he died at an early age kind of thing. So he was basically kind of like that 70s, 80s version of Chris Farley. That's kind of what I equated it to. You know what I mean? Like he kind of was same thing, on SNL, and started doing like became a huge star and started in all these big comedies, and then ultimately because of just the drugs got the best of him. So overall, I thought it was a good documentary. Definitely one that I think that almost anybody could probably watch this one and enjoy and gain some nuggets and some interesting things that you probably didn't know about him or his life or even how SNL started. I thought that was pretty cool because I had never really known how SNL came about really. So it's interesting to kind of see how all that unfolded as well. But what was your take, Jason?
Oh yeah, I loved this one too. I had a really good time over the weekend watching both of these. I love documentaries. I love the arts. So I thoroughly enjoyed both of these. And yeah, it was really great. I knew a little bit about. There's also a really good documentary about National Lampoon, the early days of National Lampoon, which was that group he was in with Bill Murray and Chevy Chase and them before SNL. There's a good documentary about that too. I like the style of this kind of documentary. It's one of those, and I didn't realize this going in. I kind of assumed that it was going to be the way it's presented would be fairly normal, but it's one of those like kind of collage style documentaries, and I really like those where you never actually you hear the voices of the people who are interviewed, but you never see them. It's not a talking head style documentary. It's like it's all the voices of people who knew him that were recorded by the author who did the biography on him, and with visual accompaniment, like all this unseen footage and movie clips. And it's just kind of like, I really like those kind of collage style documentaries. I find it very immersive. You know what I mean? It makes you kind of, it's kind of like the Tupac Resurrection documentary. It kind of like, it's not like a traditional documentary. It just kind of puts you into his headspace and it takes you on that trip, the highs and the lows.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought it was really interesting. It made me want to watch Animal House and the Blues Brothers again because it's been so long since I've seen either one of those.
Same here, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's a good comparison with Chris Farley because they were also their style was pretty similar too. It had to do with their size and their energy.
They had this energy, and they both were doing like these big guys that do like cartwheels and backflips and stuff like that, and it's super high energy and stuff like that. So, like I said, they really were very closely related. You know what I mean in that sense. And their coming up in terms of fame was very, very closely related, and their ultimate demise as well. So it's very interesting. A lot of parallels there. So.
Right. Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, tragically, I think probably their size, which was a lot of their humor, how they just kind of barrel into a scene like an ox or something, that probably contributed to their health problems. You know what I mean, too. So there's a lot of comparisons there, But yeah, I thought it was a really good documentary. Like I said, I thoroughly enjoyed both of these very much. Yeah. So yeah, they're both also. Yeah,
I would say probably also part of the. I gotta assume there was some depression there because of the drug use they were doing. Probably because of their size, because the both of them were kind of known for being the big funny lovable guys, you know what I mean? So they
Yeah.
were never going to be like the, you know, the star romantic, lead and that kind of stuff. So I'm sure that that had to affect them as well. That, there was this, everybody wanted to see the big, funny, lovable guys, you know what I mean, kind of stuff. And I'm sure that that probably weighed on them as well, So
Right. Right. Yeah.
I've heard stories about other actors that were larger and in comedic roles and that sort of stuff, and then they kind of like lost weight or whatever, or wanted to lose weight, and like producers and directors are telling them, oh, that's going to be a bad look for you because you're not going to get these roles, you're just not handsome enough or whatever case may be, so I'm sure that those were some of the same conversations they had, which probably also contributed to it, but also just the height of fame and how to deal with that. It's probably hard to explain, to be, at the top of your game and the pressure that probably comes with that to, your next big hit or your next big thing. And, when you have these big movies and then you have movies that bomb and, it's just, cause I can only imagine that just having a, anything you do, a YouTube channel, some of our shows do better than others, so when the show does great, it's like awesome, but then when the show doesn't do so good, you're like, well, what happened here? So I can only imagine being a huge movie star or television star and having those ups and downs and highs and lows and and kind of put you into a depressing spiral, especially when if you're already kind of dabbling in drugs. And I think his drug of choice was like cocaine or something of that nature, which everybody's probably drug of choice back in the 70s were and 80s.
Yeah, and heroin later on.
And then heroin as well. When you're already dabbling in that stuff and you're looking for that next big high, just the same, that next big hit, you know what I mean? You're probably slowly starting to spiral out of control. So
yeah. I mean, he went from being like kind of a semi, nobody to being on a hit TV show, having a hit movie,
exactly,
a hit album,
right,
and being on the cover of Time magazine, like all like, I don't know the span of time there, but it was pretty quick.
Yeah.
And he already had kind of a an addictive personality already. Right. So I mean, like, it's just had to scramble his brain kind of,
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, because his whole like, I guess like fame career was when was SNL, like 1975 or something like that, and to like to like 83 or something like that. So we're talking about a span of probably less than 10 years, you know what I mean? So of all that happening for him. So
so, and it's amazing, like I think you said he died when he was like 33 or something like that.
Yeah.
And he, I mean, man, that guy did some living, because he like, wow. I mean, that was 10 years ago for me, and I feel like he's lived 10 lifetimes that I have.
Yeah, I mean,
and unfortunately, he looked like it. He didn't look 33. He looked he looked 43 at least.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? And it's because he lived hard.
For sure. And there was just crazy stories about him and the dog, just some of the things that I found interesting. Like he would like just go up to random people's houses and knock on the door and be like, hey, you know who I am, right? I'm hungry and I'm tired. Can I come in and hang out for a while and crash? He would just come in like random people's houses and like eat their food and then like pass out at their house. I mean, just stuff like that.
It's a nice perk of being famous, I guess.
Yeah, that definitely doesn't work with everybody else. So we're
no.
You and I are definitely getting the cops called on us immediately. Something like that.
Yeah.
So, but cool.
Yeah.
Anything else you wanted to add about that one?
Nope.
Well, cool. Well, so I definitely enjoyed both of the docs, but as always, we'll get into we'll find out how much we both enjoyed each of them. So we'll start off with Zappa. What was your I guess overall grade? And you'll have to just do your face on that one because we didn't bring those in obviously for this show. And face, you would give that one.
I loved it. I gave it a 5 out of 5. I gave it an A. There's nothing I think that documentary could have done differently that would have helped or hurt anything. I just thought it was a great documentary. So yeah, 5 out of 5, which is a big smile.
Cool. I mean, although like I said, it wasn't tailor-made for me per se, because I'm just not into that kind of music. I mean, I'm just going based on the merit of the documentary alone, not so much whether I was into the music or not, because I really wasn't. But I thought it was a well-made documentary. I definitely thought it was interesting. I definitely thought that it added some value, especially for someone that was interested in his music and his life and that sort of stuff. So I went ahead and just gave it a 3 out of 5. One of my quality threes, because I did respect what it did. So I gave it a 3 out of 5, and I'll go ahead and give it a smile with no teeth. Which is fair. I think that's fair for someone that's not interested in that kind of music. I think that's fair. So,
yeah.
And then moving on to Belushi, what would you grade you'd give that one, and the overall face you would give that one?
Almost the same thing. I gave that 4.5 out of 5, which is an A minus, which would me be the same face. Just big smile. Yeah, loved it. I love both of these. It's my kind of movies. My two favorite genres are horror movies and documentaries. So, yeah. And I'm a fan of both of these people. So, I mean, unless it was a real train wreck of a documentary, I was going to love both of them, and I did. So,
I can see that. that. Yeah, I'm gonna go a little bit higher on this one. I enjoy this one a little bit more. It was a little bit more in my wheelhouse, probably. So I went with a 3.5 out of 5 on this one. I definitely enjoyed it. I thought it was a really, really interesting documentary, and I think this one's a little bit probably, because it's funny. There's comedy and humor in it, and that sort of stuff. So, 3.5 out of 5. So I'm gonna give it this face, which is a smile and some teeth. So not quite completely cheesing it, but just a smile and a hint of pearly whites. So, like I said, both are interesting docs. Definitely, anybody that is a fan of documentaries, especially if you are familiar with both of the artists, I think you'll definitely enjoy it overall. Even if you don't know the artist, it might just be a good documentary to watch, because they are interesting. Both of their lives, and they were both well done documentaries as well. I like the way both of them were shot. So, so something at the very least you'll get some value out of that. So, that's going to do it for the show. We thank you guys for watching. As always, if you like the show, we ask that you like, subscribe, make sure you hit the bell notifications so you don't miss any of our updates. And we will be back again with another show for you guys again real soon. We thank you for watching and hope you have a great day. Bye.